Good morning and welcome once again to another session of CABTalk. First day of summer.
Wow, it doesn't feel like it, Moira.
What happened? I thought it was very Scottish, the weather today, when I woke up. I thought,
yes.
ooh, yeah.
Drag out your winter woolies, so they haven't gone away, really, have they?
No. Still, rain is good.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, shall I do the intro?
You can.
Okay. This morning, we're really pleased to have Tracy Campbell on as our guest. Now, welcome, Tracy. You work for community... No, I've got it wrong. Can you say what you work for?
I have a small employment law advocacy business called CW Employment Law.
Yeah.
And I think it might have been a year or two ago, Citizens Advice Bureau asked if I could help out from time to time by providing some free first instance advice to people who needed more specific advice than Citizens Advice Bureau could provide to them on the spot.
Yes.
So I very happily do that. It's a good, easy community service for me.
Yeah, and that's really how we sort of learnt about you, because often people come in or ring and they want to know where to go for legal advice, but they really don't know or haven't any money to start off, and they just don't quite know where to go. We do like you, we're aware of very much of people's finances, and so I think we're beginning to build up a really good partnership, and that's great.
I think also that, especially when it comes to employment issues, it's usually quite emotional for people. There's usually that is, they're caught into it, and the emotion is quite difficult sometimes to start get them to relate to the issue, isn't it? I would imagine your first visit there's more reassurance, and
there's a lot of pastoral care involved in employment law. It's an extremely stressful time for people if they've lost their jobs, and also for employers. Employers in the sort of small businesses that you'd expect to find in the Wairarapa are deeply distressed when they have employment troubles too. It's not just employees who will feel the emotional upheaval. It's both sides of that coin, and so I feel that a big part of my job is helping people, once they know what's going on, what is going to happen, what it might be likely to cost, things of that nature. Once it's known, it's not so frightening. And a big part of those once you've been engaged to act for a person, is providing some emotional support.
Because usually a lot of things, it's built up over a period of time, isn't it? It's not usually wham, bam, I've got a problem here. It's usually some niggles has started, and then it just builds up over a period of time, doesn't it?
Employment law really covers the spectrum of human behaviour. You do get, you'll have had a seemingly happy relationship for decades, and then something will occur that causes, an insurmountable problem in the employment relationship. Or, as you say, it can be niggles. There can be very bad, you see examples of very bad behaviour on both sides, by either employees and or employers. And that's people. That is just people.
Human nature,
people
really.
Make mistakes. They get into a situation that they can't handle. They're, for all sorts of reasons, can be under too much emotional pressure. They don't have adequate information and haven't sought advice. All sorts of things go wrong.
Because I think this year in particular, it's been a very stressful year for both employer and employees. I mean, the whole world's been turned upside down. And I mean, working from home was something we used to think was never possible, but now currently it seems as it's not such a bad idea after all.
It suits some roles. COVID has been absolutely catastrophic in the world of employment law. The mediation services and the Employment Relations Authority are backed up to a just unbelievable degree. So normally, often when people come along and, once you're engaged, they want to know how long it's going to take. Well, there was a time where I could say, look, I'll have a personal grievance letter drafted for you by the middle of next week. I'll apply for mediation. We should hear back from mediation with a suitable date. We should have one within a month to 6 weeks. Yes. The vast bulk of cases settle either by negotiation or at mediation. If that fails, in the unlikely event that things fail and we have to go to the Employment Relations Authority, we should have things settled in 6 months at the outside. Now we're looking up to 18 months.
So that, again, increases the stress levels, doesn't it?
Well, you have to coach people that because there's going to be big gaps between events like mediation or filing to the ERA, they just have to let it go and try and forget about it, because the whole process is just slowed down to a snail's. I mean, the law has always moved with a certain majestic pace anyway, but now it's just ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah. And in the meantime, those people, what are they doing? How are they managing? That's the big problem, isn't it?
Well, a person's entitled to look for other work at any time, whether they have an employment dispute going on, and once their grievance is lodged, there's that grievance continues whether they have found other work or not.
Okay. Yes.
So it doesn't stop their right to redress for the way they were treated.
Yeah.
But if they want to move along from that job, they are perfectly free to do so.
Okay.
But they can still go back and deal with the grievance.
The grievance continues as a separate tranche of their life.
Yeah.
And it's much better if they do find alternative work as soon as possible for a number of reasons, not just the money. The law regards that you need, if you've lost your job, you need to take reasonable steps to find another job. You can't just sit there waiting for compensation, allowing the lost wages claim to grow and grow.
No. And that's where work and income has that they have to be looking for employment.
And work and income, I will often have to provide an email to work and income to say that there's a grievance underway. So that lets work and income know that there's a disputed situation, which can enable people in most situations to get help from work and income.
Yes,
because I mean, technically, before, in some cases, before they would come to you, they would go through their contract grievances, complaints through the contract. I mean, how often is that actually done?
Not as often as it should be. In larger organisations, government organisations, hospitals, things like that, where there's an internal HR unit, that sort of thing is more likely to occur. It's most often that the parties haven't talked about it at all, and things have blown up. And then it's in a muddle before I find out about it, in a real muddle that may not be able to be resolved, because you always hope that when you're asked to act, that the situation can be saved, and that the job will be saved and things will be sorted out. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen as often as you would like.
No,
usually by the time I see it, it's gone too far.
I think this
is there any point of return when relationships have been soured within a company for a person to try and go back into that company and work?
As I say, it does happen. You can have major blow-ups, especially in large government organisations, and you'd think they'd never want to be in the same room again, but they do. Where really good HR systems are in place, things can be worked out if people will behave professionally, they like their job, all that sort of thing. It's surprising what can be done. But the other extreme is the small employer where it's gone too far and people have actually been physically fighting or destroyed property or something really ghastly has happened.
Right, let's, I think, have a break and have some music, and then we'll come back. I think we're actually going to find out lots today, Wesley. You are listening to CABTalk on ROFM, and we've got Tracy Campbell with us today, and we're talking about employment. Now, Tracy has given her details, which we will have at the CAB, but if you need or require to phone us at the CAB, it is 06 377, I never remember the number because I don't call it, 0078, or you can call 0800 367 222. And we do take email inquiries, which is at wairarapa@cab.org.nz. Right. So we've sort of touched a bit on the COVID, but I mean, that is 2020's sort of history, really, isn't it? COVID-19, it's always going to be remembered as 2020. One of the things probably I think comes up a lot when we at the CAB is the bullying at work.
Yes, it does. And people in a dispute situation or a fractious situation at work feel bullied often. Sometimes what's occurring wouldn't be regarded as bullying in the eyes of the law. So it makes it difficult, and bullying's a really good thing to talk about because not enough is known about it. So if you are being bullied at work, then you need to keep a record and a journal, a daily journal of what's happening at work. And then you need to do something about it because it's an oddity and an unfairness at employment law that bullying may go on for years, but you can only, the cause of action that can be acted on is only 90 days. So you need to keep a journal, and you need, of the last 90, of a period, and you need to act on it by raising a personal grievance within 90 days of the bullying occurring. And also, you need to raise it with the employer in that period to give them an opportunity to fix it. So ideally, and it almost never happens, but an employee will have been keeping a diary. They will have said to their employer on several occasions in writing, you know, or at least recording that they've spoken about it, you know, that they raised it and it still wasn't fixed and the bullying still continued. And then they can come to someone like me who can raise that grievance and take that matter further for them, and then I'd have great case.
Yeah.
But almost always one or two or three of those things haven't occurred.
Yeah. So what happens if the bully is actually the employer?
It often is in small businesses.
Yes.
And when it's like that, it's a lack of self-awareness, in my experience, on the part of the person doing the bullying, and they will not be conscious that they are being a bully, and they will deny that they have been a bully, and they won't be able to accept that bullying is going on.
Yeah.
So you're in an impasse situation at that point, because if they won't recognise that they're doing it, they can't fix it.
So what do you recommend in a situation like that if the person that's being employed doesn't want to lose the job or go and look for another job, really likes the job? Can it be because the person being employed is not really up to speed on the job and is finding that he's being bullied, but really it's the boss's communication skills that are not right to teaching that guy a better way of doing the job?
Well, if you've got an employee that's below par, there are processes for managing performance at work, and that's how you follow that. What you don't do is bully your employee, stand over them, screaming at them, introducing conditions that are unreasonable, denying reasonable requests with regard to leave, throwing things around, having a raised voice. Those are not the ways to deal with performance management, and I'm sure that they wouldn't bring out the best in anyone at work.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it tends to hit into maybe that personality clash as well, and I think once, you know, when you work in a small environment, it can get quite, well, I was going to say heated, but it can get quite I suppose cancerous in a way, can't it?
It can be absolutely toxic.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, you need to look at the bigger picture and say, well, what's best for me, isn't it? Yeah, and taking it up with the employer or employee, it could actually maybe highlight to them that, maybe they need to look at themselves and thinking, well, what am I doing here? I'm always losing staff, or is this?
I think that the process, going through the process occasionally, sometimes will bring some self-awareness to the situation and improve that person's employment law practices. More often than not, that employer will be a repeat offender, and they'll have dealt with a lot of personal grievances, and it will continue because they're not able to deal with it. They just lack the self-awareness. Bullies lack self-awareness.
Yeah. So, and I mean, a lot of it is it's that form of communication, isn't it? Or lack of communication. It's usually the breakdown, because often people then, with their being bullied, they're actually scared to come forward because they don't want another backlash. And it's just vicious circle, isn't it?
Yeah, people lose their self-confidence, and I'm sure that affects their work. Some people behave in ways that makes them more likely to be victimised, and some people are more affected by bullying. You know, one person's bully is another person's pest, if you know what I mean. And that can make a big difference how it's being received. But if you've got someone who's crying at work, you need to look at what's going on in that workplace.
And it might be another workmate who's the bully as well. I mean, we're sort of probably looking at employer-employee, but it can actually be a workmate or that is actually bullying to somebody else.
It can be members of the public. There's all sorts of ways bullying can occur, but the person that's managing that workplace is responsible for doing something about it.
So as I said, but just probably be aware that bullying has got that 90-day clause that if you do feel bullied, not to not to sort of internally take it on, maybe come forward and say, look, I want this resolved.
You do need to have raised it with the employer.
Yeah.
Whoops, sorry, I kicked the table. I hope that didn't go through the mic. You do need to have raised it with the employer and have given that employer a chance to improve things. Now, you can get a representative to do that for you,
yes.
but they're not going to be able to raise a personal grievance with that employer until after that employer's been alerted that there's something wrong and been given an opportunity to fix it.
Right.
Then, if it doesn't improve for that person, then within 90 days they have grounds for a grievance. And it would be good solid grounds if people did take a representative at that stage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Tracy, when somebody is referred to you from us, you would give them that sort of information so that they know exactly what they were up against, and then if they want to carry on, then and you start doing some work for them, then you would make a financial agreement with them to work for them.
Yes, I have engagement papers. So I used to be, I got my law degree late in life at 40 years old. And then I practiced in all sorts of roles, but all of them seemed to have an employment law component. So I worked for Federated Farmers, the Meat Industry Association, the Fertilisers Association, Imperial Tobacco, as a lawyer in all those roles. And then when I came up to Masterton wanting a quieter life, not working for the likes of Imperial Tobacco, I decided I didn't need to hold a practising certificate anymore. I've never had a complaint against me to the Law Society or anything of that nature. I'm eligible for a practising certificate. I remain an enrolled barrister and solicitor, but I can't call myself a lawyer, so I'm an employment relations advocate. And so that's a bit of background. So if someone comes to me as an advocate, I give them papers almost identical to what they would have to sign when they engaged a lawyer. But mine has a disclosure there that I'm an enrolled barrister and solicitor and that I don't belong to the Law Society, so that if they had a complaint about fees, which is the most usual thing, I've never had a complaint, I hasten to say, then they wouldn't be able to go to the Law Society. But I am a member of ELINS, the Employment Law Institute of New Zealand, and they could go to ELINS instead.
Yeah, because that often is the thing, isn't it? A lot of people, it's they might have a grievance, but they think about, I can't afford to do anything about it.
Well, that was my motivation for taking on the role of an advocate, as I have far less costs than a lawyer. I have less compliance costs. I don't have to pay the much higher fees of belonging to the Law Society. And there's all sorts of compliance.
So do you do mediation between an employer and an employee, or do you more support the person who's come into the office to you?
Well, I represent either one side or the other. You certainly can't represent both sides, and I'm not qualified as a mediator. So anyone that's taking on the role of a mediator really should have
the neutral.
You could have the parties agree to have someone like me facilitate a discussion, but it would be a bit grandiose for a local lawyer or advocate to be calling themselves a mediator if they weren't specifically it's a highly trained role being a mediator. So no, I wouldn't act as a neutral facilitator in discussions. I act for either side or the other.
Yeah, because it is quite tricky, isn't it? Because so you're more of a support person to whoever you're supporting at the time.
I'm representing them. I'm quite a tough negotiator.
So I want to ask you, is there any preference
between employer and employee? No, not really. I don't
Just
mind.
do your job.
Yeah, I don't mind.
I suppose each case is different, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting though, isn't it?
And it's all to do with personal people.
Yes.
So what happens
people's behaviour?
if you get 2 phone calls, one after the other, one from the employee and one from the employer?
Oh, it happens.
Yeah.
It happens. So every phone call, even the ones from Citizens Advice Bureau, I'll ask them who the employer is or who the employee is. And I just say, we live in a small town and I can't take the risk of there being a conflict, so I do need to get you to tell me who we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, for all we know, it could be my brother-in-law or someone I've acted for or someone and this has happened recently, someone for whom I'm acting currently.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it would be utterly unethical for me to be hearing about their side of the story.
Yep.
It'd be exactly the same if you were a lawyer and someone wanted you to represent them and they were also already a lawyer for the other person.
Yes.
Yeah. You can't have both feet in the.
Yes.
No, you certainly can't.
In it. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, my brain is racing with questions, Wesley, but we'll have a bit of a break, shall we?
I actually.
Panther, cause you know yes is my answer. My mind is in the dirt, making my pies. The heavy heat stretch, open my eyes. You don't need a subway token, nature's fee remains unspoken. The sun is shining through the leaves on the wildflowers in the weeds. Watching people have a good time. Watching people have a good time in the summertime. Flying picnic blanket in the summer groove. Watching people have a good time. Watching people have a good time.
Quite
That's good.
That's good.
Right. Yes, we interested in what we was talking about off air. We were sort of like talking about summertime, but we were talking about exercises, and so that probably brought us into the topic of what is it? Rest and meal breaks at work. I think it's quite a bit cloudy in some areas, and maybe we're probably guilty of that, of working through our meal breaks ourselves as an employee.
It's an interesting issue where rules have changed a bit over the last years. So at the moment, you're entitled to a half-hour unpaid lunch break and 2 10-minute paid breaks during the day as a default, but it's not a certainty by any means, and there's considerable flexibility for employers to arrange that differently if it suits their workplace. Now, there will be many workplaces where that's absolutely appropriate. If you're employed by a haymaking contractor or a tailing gang, clearly you are not going to have a cup of tea in the middle of a muster or something like that.
No, and I mean, everybody knocks off at the same time to have smoko, don't they?
Yes,
if it's
they
in
do.
The country.
So there isn't flexibility in and you can imagine many factory situations where it has to be to suit the production, the work production rather than employees. Now, what is supposed to happen in the ideal is that employees too want flexibility. So a person may prefer to work through the lunch break and go home half an hour earlier. That, especially picking up children, things like that may suit people. So what is supposed to happen is that the employer and employee are supposed to work it out amongst themselves, bearing that default in mind. If they can't work it out amongst themselves, there's a schedule that's published on Workplace New Zealand's work site that gives you an example of, there's all sorts of scenarios. It's in a table form, so if you work 6 hours, this is what should happen, this is the minimum requirement. If you're working longer shift, there's all sorts of scenarios there set out in tabularised form, and that gives a very strong indication of what the Employment Relations Authority would regard as reasonable behaviour for the employer. So both employers and employees could look at that to see whether the situation at work for them was reasonable. But it's not in legislation itself. It's not a by-law thing. It is a thing that it's envisaged by the law that employer and employee will come to a reasonable solution in their own workplace.
Is it in the contract? Employment contract?
It certainly can be, and if it's in the employment agreement, then it must be abided by, and that can only be varied by agreement.
I think that we find at CAB, most of the people that come in with a problem haven't even got their contract, don't know where it is, don't know whether they've been given it, and it's only when things go wrong that they start to think, oh, where is it? Oh, the employer never gave it to me. Whether he did or didn't, it doesn't really seem to matter. You're entitled to have a copy of it.
Yes.
Isn't it by law that they're supposed to have a contract before you start your employment?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
They're called employment agreements, but it's perfectly fine to call them a contract. I have to call them an employment agreement because that's the proper name.
Yes.
But anyway, the employer ought to have given ought to have a signed employment agreement with the employee before the employee starts work, and they put themselves at risk if they don't do that. The fact is that doesn't always occur. In fact, it often does. It surprisingly often doesn't occur. It really surprises me.
Yes.
Now, if an employee doesn't have a copy of their employment agreement, the employer has to give them a copy upon request.
Yes.
And usually by the time that comes into the hands of someone like me, that'll be the first thing I'll put in my letter is I want a copy of this employment agreement. If it transpires that there isn't an employment agreement, that employer has already placed themselves in a position where they look like a very bad employer. The employee is still protected because the Act becomes their employment agreement. So they have all of the entitlements that the Act provides, which is what is in a standard employment agreement anyway.
So for the employer, it's really his protection to get that into place before his employee starts, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
An employer who hasn't got written employment, signed written employment agreements is taking a huge risk.
And an employer can actually download contracts, can't they?
They can.
Yeah.
There are terrible problems with that.
Yes.
Now, if they go to the government's workplace site and use the employment agreement builder there, that's not too bad. But they will find that the government site actually gives the employee its best practice stuff. So they'll actually end up with an employment agreement that gives the employee more rights than the employer really had to in certain areas. So if they want to do that, that's wonderful. If they want, but they may wish to get someone like me to draft that for them, so that in certain areas that may affect their business, that they're only doing what the law says they have to do, not some much more, best practice version of the law.
Because I suppose it is very individual to the role of the employer's business and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, as we were saying, like a farmer having a scheduled half-hour break. In
the middle of a muster.
It
wasn't tailing.
It's ridiculous. It doesn't quite work, does it?
And also, I think some businesses rely very much on the time schedules of their breaks. Otherwise, if you've got a production line of strawberries going through, and they say, right, stop, we have to. And then you haven't quite filled that box and all those sort of things that, having worked in a packing house, I know exactly what goes on.
Yeah.
And you need to have those regulated time slots.
I think probably when in production or a bigger workforce, I think in some ways the breaks are more structured, aren't they, to work in, because they've sort of got to do it, haven't they, to keep the production going.
And I think also at this time with the employment situation in the country because of COVID and not being able to get in, those people that used to come in and rely on the work in the rural scene, and they say, our New Zealand people are not prepared to get out and do that work. It doesn't go down all that well, does it really? No, it really makes you think, gosh, how have we got to this stage where a everyday New Zealander can't turn around and do that job that is really specialised?
I think we're getting into the baby boomers topics.
No.
I think we would probably had different probably directions when we were kids.
When I was first married, when the shearers came to our farm, we had a couple of Aussie shearers that always came over for shearing, and you fed them in the kitchen, you fed them in your house, and they slept out in the warri, and they were more than happy. They thought we treated them well.
I think you probably find there are certain roles that people do, particularly tour around the world and travelling, like the shearers. They tend to go to more seasonal stuff. Like we could talk about the ski fields. A lot of people will go from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, and with the COVID, it's just, for that 14 days quarantine, it sort of put a break to it as well, because people, 2 weeks idle, not working, can have a huge effect. And then, of course, the farmer wants sheep sheared now, not 2 weeks later. And there has been lots of things that's come up that we probably just got so used to things just rolling on.
We do.
And it's not happening now. And I think, in working is different to what it was. I mean, I was 10-year-old when I first went and worked and picking potatoes up. Now you just wouldn't be allowed to do that now. But I was allowed in Scotland in October. We used to call it the tatty week, the potato week, and it was when the school closed for a week. for people who wanted to go and help the farmers pick potatoes. Well, that would be child labour there, wouldn't it? That would be misuse of labour. But I was 10. So I qualified to go out for the week picking potatoes. And I thought it was great because I got, money at the end of it.
Yes.
Yeah, but you can't. So things have changed, and we sometimes forget to move forward a little bit. In my days, this happened. Yeah.
I want to go. Something's occurred to me while you were speaking. I want to go back to the downloading of employment agreements off the internet. Several of the more disastrous situations I've seen for employers is where they've downloaded internet. They've gotten something that comes from the States or from Australia or Canada, and it doesn't comply with New Zealand's law. And the instant another lawyer or advocate sees this, they know this, and it puts that employer in jeopardy of very.
Well, I suppose it's void. The contract's void.
Well, it's not. No, it's not void. They have to. They've just shot themselves in the foot, and they'll end up paying a lot more. Let me tell you.
So they have to currently work underneath that contract in a sense and resolve it.
Oh, the employee can't contract out of the act. So the employee had minimum rights, but if they've had this shonky contract imposed on them, then the employer's just in a very bad situation and will end up with a hefty, having to pay hefty compensation.
Okay.
Well,
So stay away from the internet except for the government site.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to say.
Well, that's a very good warning to people to just look at what you're downloading, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit like, the internet is such a tool nowadays, isn't it? And I mean, we all laugh about Dr. Google, and a lot of people do use that sites, and they're not aware that not all sites are actually very good.
you can trust government's workplace, New Zealand. They do a splendid job.
Interesting. So that's big story from the meal break, isn't it?
It is.
And I think also the meal break, there is that confusion about workplace, where you work in. And I have heard people say they feel that the law's made for the office worker but not for the actual manual worker. And I think, it's like sick leave and things like that. It can be made more for in office rather than out in the community. So there's always going to be that difference, is there?
Well, one question, when it comes to the meal breaks or morning breaks, does the employer provide the refreshments, the tea, coffee?
There's no obligation.
There's no obligation.
The tea and coffee. No.
It's usually complimentary, isn't it? That they do.
It would be. There will be certain situations where the employer would have. Farming's one of them, obviously. Whereas if you don't provide food, there isn't a shop handy, and you're going to have your workforce walking off or driving off the site to go and get food eventually.
Yes. Yeah.
So there are some situations where workplaces do provide food, but there's no obligation at law to do that.
And often shearer gangs have their own cook, don't they?
Yes,
along
they do,
and things like that nowadays. Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
And at Citizens Advice, we provide all our tea and coffee and biscuits, and there's always a great discussion about the right biscuits to have.
Chocolate biscuits is a treat when you work at the CAB.
Yes. Well, we digress. So let's get on to another topic on your list. Or do you want to take a break?
I'm just thinking, we'll sort of like, we've got a quarter an hour yet to summarise, or do you want a bit of break and have some music, and then we'll come back and finish. Okay, it's going to be potluck. I'm not sure what I picked for music.
Time you straighten right out.
We won't cover that because
Okay,
that's a different field. We'll
Okay.
just do a wind-up, shall we?
Well, we are doing a wind up by the sounds of it. I caught Wesley out there. Yeah, we were just sort of talking about different areas of employment and employment issues, and it's quite a wide topic area, really. Even, like we're talking about, whether you enjoy union or not. I mean, that can be, for some employers, they just automatically join the union, but for others, it's discouraged in some ways, I would think.
Yes, it is. I can wind you up with quite a strong political opinion here. I think that low-paid people on or near the minimum wage, that union membership of a union should be offered as a default, like KiwiSaver. So for those work sites, you are signed up with the union with your employment agreement, and you have an opt-out option. And I think that would materially alter conditions for low-paid workers in New Zealand, but that's a political view. That's not a view as an employment relations advocate.
Yeah, and some of these decisions are before government, and government are going to, in the next year, alter a few things that we may or may not agree with. But you, being in your business, would become very obvious to you what was there that would be good for employees and employers.
Well, especially for more vulnerable workers, you start, because I'm really quite a politically conservative person, but on that topic, I'm probably left of Jacinta Ardern,
I mean, it is one of those issues, and I think, in New Zealand, they've actually had that history of where the union was very, very strong at one time, I believe. You had a really good, strong union following, and then it seemed to have got squashed.
Yeah.
And then I think it's now beginning to pick up a bit, because I think certain areas that people have actually belonged to a union, you hear about it more in the news, about their work conditions, about them pushing forward for more money and things like that. And again, and I think it's sort of like pricking a few people and thinking, well, what does a union actually do? Yeah.
It will never return to the days of the 70s. That was, you're clearly from Scotland.
Yes.
It was very similar here to when Arthur Scargill and Margaret Thatcher were at loggerheads, and we had a union breaking era in the 80s. Was never going to go back to that, but where I feel the pendulum has swung too far is in respect of low-paid workers, and people on casual contracts and things of that nature.
Yeah, I must admit, probably because I've worked in the health industry, I've always been from day one encouraged to be a union member. It was just part of your role. You become a union member, and a lot of that was because they said it was that protection level for you as an employee. If anything went wrong, there was no way you could actually afford the big guys, we used to say, to help you out. But being in a union, it was there for your protection. So I always perceive union to being a union member. You're there as it's like your insurance policy you're taking out for you. Well,
employers have Business New Zealand and their own industry groups that act for them, Federated Farmers and so on. And there's absolutely no reason in the world why particularly low-paid and more vulnerable workers shouldn't also be able to have collective action. Yeah. It's as simple as that. It's just a matter of fairness.
Yeah, now you mentioned Business New Zealand. Now that used to be Chamber of Commerce, is that right?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, Chambers of Commerce usually belong to their own.
Yeah, I thought they changed the name.
Oh, did they?
Yes, and it became Business New Zealand.
Oh, well, no, we're not good. If you want to find the answer, give us a call at Citizens of Us.
And we'll Google it for you.
It's just that I think that the employers need something like that as a support
They
network.
do have many. They do. Virtually every type of employer has some kind of industry group they can belong to.
Yes, with builders as well. Yes. Because that's another employment situation, and with the huge amount of building going on in this country, those jobs are something that can be very difficult to
I think-
negotiate.
I think also with it as well, it comes into the health and safety aspect. A union can be there for a good representative towards health and safety, and builders in particular. I mean, there has been, it's not a very good thing if injuries at work there is quite high. Like farming, unfortunately, when there's an injury in a farm, it's usually pretty serious as well. So it always makes news headlines,
It
but I
does.
think the health and safety, my way of thinking, would actually be involved in with the unions of ensuring that that's in place as well.
They're very unions are very good at achieving collective
Yeah.
goods. They're probably the shape they're in at the moment. It's not as easy for them to advocate for individual members because they're not well enough resourced the way they used to be. But they're certainly good at getting collective outcomes like health and safety for an industry.
So who pays the union?
Members.
The members.
Fees.
The
monthly
employers don't have to pay anything to a union to support.
Well,
Does the government get anything from to give anything towards a union?
no,
No.
be
So
heresy.
it all relies on the people that belong to the union to pay their dues.
And that's where years ago, where most people belonged to a union, that's when the unions had more strength because they had the funding. It
Well,
all-
we had compulsory unionism in the 70s.
Yes.
So where now it's your choice whether you do or not. And it's probably nearly our choice to wrap up, as Wesley said earlier on.
Yes.
But Tracy, you've actually been quite enlightened in coming on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I hope the listeners have really listened to this and taken it on board. What Tracy can help you with, but also, Tracy, it's really opened my eyes to the situations that people get themselves into, and where help is available. So, thank you very much for coming in, and we'll hope to see you at CAB one day and talk to us at CAB.
Now,
Thank
Tracy
you.
does work from home and out of at Chapel Street. She's got an office at Chapel Street there, and her contact details are 022 675 0464. But as I said, if you got our number at the Citizens Advice Bureau 377 0078, we have Tracy's contact details there. So if you do feel as though you've got something you want to make inquiries about, please give us a call or Tracy a call. It's usually when you're resolving your own issue, you can actually help others as well in the future, because usually it's not the only one person, it's usually others going on as well.
Yeah.
Right, so I think we hear our next people come in for the next show, so we'll have to probably close off, Wesley.
Yes, thank you, Moira, for taking the controls today.
You're welcome.
As again, I said, thank you, Tracy.
Well, thank you, Moira and Wesley, for inviting me.
The Citizens Advice Bureau is where you talk and we listen.
But here on CABTalk, we talk and you listen. CABTalk, every Tuesday at 10 o'clock on Arrow FM.
And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the light side of life. If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. Hey, always look on the bright side of life. Come on. Always look on the bright side of life. For life is quite absurd, and death's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your scene, give the audience a grin. Enjoy it, it's your last chance anyhow. So always look on the bright side of death. Just before you draw your terminal breath. Life's a piece of shit, when you look at it. Life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show, keep 'em laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the right side of life.